As the wind howled outside, Oliver's voice echoed through the empty halls, whispering your name. Because the house remembers, and it's ready to claim you next. The house had been abandoned for years, its history buried beneath dust and silence. But tonight something seemed to stir within its walls. Could the air really feel heavier, as if something was watching, waiting? The Johnson family, seeking a new life, had no idea what they were walking into. Why did Oliver, the youngest, refuse to step inside at first? And when he whispered, "Mommy, it's already here," what was he really seeing? Was it just a child's imagination, or something far darker? As the days went on, Oliver changed. Was it just the stress of moving, or was the house somehow affecting him? What was it that had been waiting so long, and what did it want from Oliver? Was it too late to leave, or was the house already claiming its prize? The youngest child. A practical and hard-working father, Mark moved his family to the countryside seeking a fresh start. Claire Johnson. Loving and nurturing, Claire was determined to create a peaceful life for her husband and children. Ethan Johnson. A curious 14-year-old, Ethan had a natural sense of adventure and a close bond with his younger sister Lily. Smart and independent, 10-year-old Lily was the protective older sister to Oliver and loved exploring with her family. Oliver Johnson. The youngest at 5, Oliver was full of energy and wonder, always looking up to his parents and siblings. Mark and Claire Johnson, desperate for a fresh start, decided to move with their 3 children, Ethan, 14, Lily, 10, and Oliver, 5, to this isolated countryside home. It was dirt cheap. Too cheap. But Mark didn't believe in old legends. Claire was too tired of city life to worry about strange feelings. But the second they crossed the threshold, something shifted in the air. Oliver, the youngest, froze. He wouldn't move inside. His tiny hands trembled as he clutched Claire's sleeve. His face was pale. "Mommy, there's something here," Oliver whispered, eyes wide with terror. Claire knelt down trying to soothe him, but she felt it too. The air around them seemed to grow colder, heavier. From the corner of the room, a shape, shadowy, unnatural, twitched and stared. A smile slowly stretched across its featureless face. The first night. That night, after tucking Oliver into bed, Claire heard the soft sound of scratching. She went to check, only to find Oliver wide awake, staring at the open closet. His eyes were dark, black as the void. "Sweetie, it's okay. Just go to sleep." But Oliver's little voice was different, not his own. "He's waiting, in the shadows," Oliver whispered, trembling. Claire walked over to shut the closet door. But as she did, Oliver glanced up, his tiny hands clutching the blanket. "He's behind you, Mommy," he whispered with an unnatural smile. A cold sweat formed on Claire's neck as she slowly turned around. Nothing. But the darkness seemed to be watching, breathing. The changes. Over the next few days, Oliver became a shell of himself. He stopped eating, his skin now a sickly gray, almost translucent. His eyes were vacant. He didn't speak. And when he did, it was in a voice so hollow it sent chills down Claire's spine. Late at night, she found him standing in the hallway, whispering to something unseen. The air was thick with dread. Mark tried to ignore it, but Claire knew something was wrong. Then, Oliver's drawings started to appear. They were dark, twisted figures with faces that seemed to morph, shift, and watch. A tall, faceless man stood in the closet. And Oliver, his hands stretched unnaturally long, eyes hollow, was drawn as though he wasn't human. One night, Ethan found Oliver sitting on the floor, laughing uncontrollably. But there was no one with him. Ethan asked, "What's so funny?" Oliver's face twisted into a grin too wide, an impossible grin. His voice, now deep and guttural, answered, "He thinks you'll taste the best." The nightmare begins. Claire woke to a sound in the middle of the night. Drip, drip, drip. She followed the sound downstairs. The kitchen lights flickered, then went out. In the pitch-black darkness, she heard wet slapping noises on the floor. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and Oliver was standing on the kitchen counter, barefoot, with his hands covered in something red, sticky, and foul. The fridge door was wide open. Inside, the raw meat had been ripped apart, shredded like it was devoured by something with claws. Oliver's head twisted to the side unnaturally, and his black eyes locked onto hers. His voice, now unnervingly deep and otherworldly, whispered, "I was so hungry, Mommy." The kitchen door slammed shut with a violent force. A choking laugh echoed from the shadows, followed by a loud crack as something invisible broke. Then the lights exploded. Something else in the house. Claire couldn't get help. Doctors and therapists did nothing. Oliver had stopped being human. At night, Claire heard scratching noises inside the walls, slow, deliberate. And sometimes Oliver's voice, backwards, humming nursery rhymes in a voice that was too old. He stopped blinking, stopped breathing. He was no longer alive. The exorcism. Father Matthews arrived, clutching his Bible with trembling hands. When he saw Oliver, he went pale. "He's not your son anymore," the priest muttered, his voice filled with terror. But Claire wouldn't accept it. They tied Oliver to the bed. He didn't struggle. He just stared with those unblinking black eyes. The priest began the exorcism. The temperature plummeted, and the room suddenly felt suffocatingly tight, as if the walls were closing in. Oliver's body bent and contorted, his limbs stretching in unnatural ways. Then, Oliver's mouth opened wider than should be possible. Too wide. His head snapped back, his jaw unhinging, a black abyss inside. Hands, long, skeletal fingers, crawled out from his throat. A disembodied arm reached out, followed by another. They grabbed the priest, pulling him toward the void in Oliver's mouth. The candles exploded, the air was filled with an inhuman scream, and the house shook violently. The final moment. The house stood eerily silent by morning. No sound, no movement. When the police arrived, there was no sign of struggle, no blood, just a faint, rotting smell that lingered in the air. But Oliver was still there. Or rather, what had taken his place. He stepped outside. The for sale sign loomed in the front yard. And then he smiled, wide and unnatural, his mouth stretching beyond any human limits. Because he knew another family would soon come. And he was so hungry,